Most people think the problem is not having enough money. They're wrong. Dead wrong. The real problem, the one nobody talks about at dinner parties or financial seminars, is what happens inside your skull the moment real money actually arrives. Not the fantasy of money, not the idea of money, the actual, tangible, undeniable presence of a significant sum sitting in your account, waiting. That's where the real battle begins. And most people lose it before they even realize they're fighting. Here's the paradox that should stop you cold. The people who need money the most are often the most psychologically equipped to handle its absence, and the least equipped to handle its presence. You've spent years, maybe decades, becoming a master of scarcity. You know how to stretch a paycheck. You know how to negotiate a bill. You know how to survive on less. But nobody taught you how to survive on more. Nobody showed you what to do when the number in your account stops being a source of anxiety and starts being a source of something far more dangerous: possibility. Think about a thermostat. Not metaphorically, actually think about how a thermostat works. You set it to 68 degrees. The room gets cold and the system kicks on, pushing heat until it hits 68. The room gets too warm and the system kicks off, letting it cool back down. The thermostat doesn't care about your comfort in any meaningful sense. It cares about one thing: returning to its set point. Your brain has a financial thermostat. It was calibrated years ago, probably in childhood, and it has been running your financial life ever since, almost entirely without your awareness. The set point isn't a number you chose consciously. It's a number your nervous system absorbed from watching your parents argue about bills, from hearing phrases like "money doesn't grow on trees," from growing up in a household where financial stress was the ambient background noise of daily life. And here's the brutal truth about thermostats. They work in both directions. When you fall below the set point, anxiety drives you to earn more. But when you rise above the set point, when a big client pays out, when a business deal closes, when an investment finally returns, the same system kicks in to bring you back down. Not because you're weak, not because you're flawed, because that's what thermostats do. They return to set point. Always. The science backs this up in ways that should genuinely disturb you. Research in behavioral economics, particularly work building on Kahneman and Tversky's foundational studies on prospect theory, consistently shows that humans experience financial losses roughly twice as powerfully as equivalent gains. But what's less discussed is the follow-on research, suggesting that sudden, unexpected gains trigger a specific category of cognitive dissonance, a kind of mental static when they exceed a person's internalized wealth identity. In simpler terms, your brain doesn't just respond to how much money you have, it responds to how much money it believes you're supposed to have. When those two numbers diverge significantly, the brain treats the excess not as a gift, but as a threat, a problem to be solved, a discrepancy to be corrected. And the correction, more often than not, looks like self-sabotage. This is not a character flaw. Say that again to yourself slowly. This is not a character flaw. It is a calibration problem. It is a thermostat set to the wrong temperature. And, like any thermostat, it can be reset. But first, you have to understand exactly how it's sabotaging you. The specific mechanisms, the specific loops, the specific moments where the system fires and pulls you back toward your set point. Because once you can see the mechanism, you can interrupt it. And interrupting it, even once at the right moment, is worth more than a decade of affirmations. The first mechanism is what you might call the identity tax. Here's how it works. You've built an identity around a certain version of yourself. Maybe you're the scrappy one, the hustle-hard, sleepless, grind-through-it person who figures things out with limited resources. That identity isn't just a story you tell at parties, it's a neurological structure. Neuroscientists call this the narrative self, the story your prefrontal cortex constructs about who you are and what you're capable of. Studies in self-concept research, including work published by William Swan at the University of Texas on self-verification theory, show something remarkable and unsettling. People will actively seek information and create situations that confirm their existing self-concept, even when that self-concept is negative. Even when confirming, it hurts them. The brain isn't trying to make you feel good, it's trying to feel consistent. So when significant money arrives, when your business hits 6 figures for the first time, when you receive an inheritance, when a commission check lands that's 3 times your usual, something quiet and powerful happens. The money doesn't fit the story. And the brain, being the story protection machine it fundamentally is, begins to find ways to make the story true again. You suddenly feel the urge to upgrade your lifestyle immediately and entirely. You feel inexplicably anxious in a way you can't name. You start making decisions you'd normally consider reckless, and you rationalize each one perfectly in the moment. You're not spending the money, you're paying the identity tax. You're buying your way back to the version of yourself that feels familiar. The practical exit from this loop is uncomfortable but simple. You have to consciously revise the story before the money arrives, not after. Meaning, you build the identity of someone who manages large capital before you have large capital to manage. You practice the cognitive habits, the language, the decision frameworks of a person operating at the next level, not as affirmation, as rehearsal. Athletes visualize not just winning, but the specific physical mechanics of the winning moment. You need to visualize not just having money, but the specific decisions you make when it's sitting in your account and every instinct is telling you to move it. The second mechanism runs even deeper. Call it the tribal expulsion fear. Humans evolved in small groups, tribes of roughly 150 people, according to Robin Dunbar's foundational research on social group sizes and cognitive capacity. In those groups, survival was collective. Individual excess was genuinely dangerous, not just socially awkward, but life-threatening, because it implied resource hoarding in a zero-sum environment. The neurological wiring from that era is still inside you, fully intact, running background processes every moment of every day. When you accumulate significantly more wealth than the people in your immediate social circle, your nervous system registers a signal that reads, at a primal level, like tribal expulsion, like separation from the group, like danger. This isn't metaphorical. Brain imaging studies show that social exclusion activates the same neural regions as physical pain. So when accumulating wealth triggers subconscious signals of social separation, the discomfort is real, physical, and powerful. And because most people have never been taught to recognize this signal for what it is, they respond to it instinctively. They bring themselves back into alignment with the tribe. They spend money in ways that are visible and shared. They give it away impulsively. They downplay their success. They make bad investments with people from their social circle because accepting bad returns feels safer than risking social distance. Watch what happens in working class and lower middle class communities when someone gets a sudden windfall. Lottery winners are the extreme example, but the pattern repeats at every level. The money disperses rapidly outward, back into the social network, often within months. This isn't generosity, though it's coded as generosity. It's tribal reintegration. It's the thermostat doing its work. Wealthy families do this differently, not because they're more selfish, but because they've inherited a different set of social norms around money's relationship to identity and group belonging. The old money family that never talks about money isn't being mysterious. They're operating inside a social ecosystem where wealth accumulation doesn't signal separation from the tribe, because the tribe is also wealthy. The practical move here is to deliberately expand your reference group before you need to. Find communities, online, in person, through mentorship, of people operating at the financial level you're building toward. Read their biographies. Study their decision patterns. Let your nervous system acclimate to the social reality of wealth before the money triggers the alarm. You're essentially pre-vaccinating your brain against the tribal expulsion signal. The third mechanism is what deserves the name the Competence Illusion Loop. You've heard of imposter syndrome. In financial life, it operates with unique viciousness. Here's the specific loop. You work hard, you succeed at something, significant money follows, and instead of feeling validated, you feel exposed. Because somewhere in the accounting, your brain does automatically, it finds a simpler explanation for the success than your skill or effort. It finds luck. It finds timing. It finds the client who happened to call, the market that happened to move, the opportunity that just happened to align. And now you're sitting on more money than you believe you earned, and your brain is running a constant low-grade audit, waiting for the correction, waiting for someone to figure out the math doesn't add up, waiting to be found out. Psychologists Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes, who first formally described imposter phenomenon in a 1978 study on high-achieving women, noted something that often gets lost in pop psychology retellings. The syndrome doesn't diminish with success, it often intensifies. Each new success doesn't feel like evidence of competence, it feels like a higher-stakes version of the same bluff, with more to lose when it finally collapses. In financial terms, this loop produces a very specific behavior. You fail to protect what you've built. Not through extravagance, but through inaction and avoidance. You don't set up the structure, the accounts, the legal entities, the investment vehicles, because engaging with the money seriously would mean acknowledging that you actually have it. And acknowledging that you have it means acknowledging that you could lose it. So you leave it in a checking account, you make no decisions, you procrastinate every financial conversation, and meanwhile, the money sits in the worst possible configuration. Accessible, unprotected, earning nothing, and vulnerable to every impulsive moment of identity tax payment. The exit from this loop requires a specific cognitive reframe. Stop asking, "Did I deserve this?" That question has no useful answer, and your brain will never deliver a satisfying one. Ask instead, what does someone who manages this amount of money do in the next 30 days? That's it. That's the entire reframe. Move from identity to procedure, from feeling to function. You don't have to believe you deserve the money to take the next correct action with it. Actions don't require deserving, they require deciding. The wealthiest people you'll ever study are not necessarily the ones who felt the most confident. They're the ones who acted correctly despite the doubt. Buffett himself has described his investment process in terms of systematic procedure, not emotional conviction. The procedure runs regardless of mood. Build your procedure. Run it regardless of how you feel about whether you deserve to be running it. The fourth mechanism is the visibility paradox. Money, at certain levels, becomes visible in ways that feel threatening. Not visible in the sense that people know your bank balance, visible in the sense that your choices become legible. When you had little money, your financial decisions were mostly invisible. You bought what you could afford. You didn't invest because there was nothing to invest. Your financial life was simple, and simplicity is a form of camouflage. Now, You have choices, and choices are visible. The car you drive says something. The neighborhood you live in says something. Whether you invest conservatively or aggressively says something about your beliefs and values and risk tolerance in a way that can be judged, analyzed, and criticized. This visibility triggers a specific type of anxiety that researchers in social psychology call evaluation apprehension, the heightened self-consciousness that comes from believing you're being observed and assessed. And evaluation apprehension doesn't just make you nervous, it impairs decision-making. It narrows cognitive bandwidth. It shifts your financial decisions from what is the right move to what move can I defend if it goes wrong. Think about a specific person, the first-generation college graduate who gets a meaningful raise and suddenly can't decide what to do with it. Not because they don't know the options. They've read the books, they've watched the YouTube channels, they know about index funds and emergency funds and the difference between a Roth and a traditional IRA. But they're paralyzed, because every choice now feels like a test they could fail publicly. And failing publicly, being judged for making the wrong financial move, feels more dangerous than making no move at all. So they make no move. They let the money sit. They wait for certainty that never comes. Meanwhile, someone who grew up around wealth makes the imperfect but functional choice immediately without agonizing, because imperfect action is what they watched their parents model their entire childhood. The practical correction is to create what behavioral economists call commitment devices, pre-made decisions executed automatically, removed from the visibility pressure of the moment. Automatic investment contributions, standing orders, predetermined allocation rules. The decision is made once, in a calm moment with clear thinking. Then it runs on its own. You remove the moment-to-moment evaluation apprehension because there is no moment-to-moment decision being made. The thermostat gets reset structurally, not emotionally. The fifth mechanism might be the most insidious of all. It's called the ceiling effect, and it works like this. Every time you've approached a significant financial threshold in your life, $10,000, $50,000, $100,000, whatever the number that feels categorically different from your normal reality, something happened. Maybe you got there and immediately faced an unexpected expense that wiped it out. Maybe you made a bad decision. Maybe you got close and then a deal fell through. The specific content doesn't matter. What matters is the pattern your brain extracted from the data. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine. It is extraordinarily good at learning from repeated experiences. And if you've repeatedly approached a certain financial level and then fallen back, your brain has done what it does with all repeated patterns. It has learned to predict the ceiling. It has built a model that says, this is where it ends. And then, because the brain doesn't just predict the future, it actively shapes behavior to confirm its predictions, it engineers the outcome. Not consciously, not maliciously, automatically. The way your muscles automatically adjust your walking pattern on terrain you've crossed before. This is why lottery winners so frequently return to their pre-lottery financial states within a few years, not because they're irresponsible, because the internal ceiling hasn't moved. The external number changed, the internal set point didn't. The thermostat dragged them home. And this is why the work of resetting financial psychology has to happen before the money arrives. You cannot reset the thermostat while the house is already at the wrong temperature and every system is fighting to hold it there. There is a body of research built on the work of Sonia Lyubomirsky and others studying hedonic adaptation that shows humans adapt surprisingly quickly to new financial realities, both negative and positive. But the adaptation isn't neutral. When it happens in the absence of deliberate psychological work, It tends to reset back toward old baselines rather than establish new ones. The practical move is to spend deliberate time, not wishful thinking, but structured cognitive rehearsal above your current ceiling. Read financial statements for amounts you don't currently have. Model investment scenarios at the next level of capital. Talk to accountants and financial advisors about structures you don't yet need. You're not being delusional, you're pre-adapting. You're moving the ceiling before you hit it, so that when you arrive, your nervous system recognizes the territory and doesn't trigger the return to baseline response. Now bring all of this together and see what you're actually looking at. You're looking at a system, a closed loop, a thermostat running 5 interlocking mechanisms, all pointing toward the same set point, all firing simultaneously the moment significant money appears. The identity tax wants you to spend it, to stay familiar. The tribal expulsion fear wants you to distribute it, to stay connected. The competence illusion loop wants you to avoid it, to stay safe from judgment. The visibility paradox wants you to paralyze you with the weight of choice. And the ceiling effect has pre-wired you to expect failure at a specific altitude. Against all of this, just be disciplined is not advice. It's a joke. Discipline is a resource. It depletes. It fails under sustained pressure. You cannot white-knuckle your way past a deeply calibrated neural system using willpower alone. You need to reset the system. You need to move the set point. Here is what moving the set point actually looks like in practice. It is not visualization in the sense of imagining yourself on a yacht. It is not affirmations written on a mirror. Those approaches aren't wrong, they're just upstream of where the real work happens. The real work happens at the level of repeated exposure, structured decision-making, and social environment redesign. Repeated exposure. You create regular contact with the financial reality you're building toward, not as fantasy, as study. You read the annual reports of companies you want to invest in. You review your own financial statements weekly. At the moment comes, the thermostat doesn't have an opening. The decision was already made when you were calm and clear. Social environment redesign. You deliberately, intentionally, without apology, begin spending more time with people who are operating at the financial level you're building toward. Not to be sycophantic, not to network in the transactional sense, but to let your nervous system normalize the reality, to let the tribal expulsion signal quiet down because the tribe you're orienting toward looks more like the person you're becoming. The thermostat metaphor has one more implication that's worth sitting with. A thermostat doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care that you want the room warmer. It runs its program based on the set point, not your preferences. The set point was installed a long time ago by people who didn't know they were installing it. Parents, teachers, early experiences, cultural programming. They weren't trying to limit you, they were transmitting what they knew. But what they knew was calibrated for their reality, not yours. And you have been running their program in your life ever since, largely without realizing it, wondering why your financial results keep returning to a range that feels oddly familiar. Not because you're not smart enough, not because you're not working hard enough, because the program hasn't been updated. You can update it. The neuroscience is clear on this. The brain retains plasticity throughout life, and the neural structures underlying financial behavior and identity are modifiable through deliberate, repeated experience. This isn't soft science. This is the same neuroplasticity research that has transformed how we treat everything from addiction to chronic pain. The pathways your brain uses to process wealth and financial identity are not fixed. They are not destiny. They are habits encoded in neural structure. And neural habits can be changed the same way they were formed, through repetition, through environment, through the stories you allow to run. The door that you've been standing in front of, the one that leads to a financial reality significantly beyond your current set point, it was never locked from the outside. The lock was always on the inside. And it was never a lock at all. It was a thermostat, a calibrated, automatic, well-meaning thermostat installed by people who loved you and didn't know any better. They set it to the temperature they were comfortable with, the temperature that felt safe to them. And it has been doing its job perfectly ever since, keeping you exactly where they thought you should be, pulling you back when you drifted too far above the line, protecting you from the discomfort of a room that felt unfamiliar. But here's what the physics of the thermostat also tells you. The set point can be changed. It can be changed deliberately, systematically, and permanently. Not by fighting the mechanism, by reprogramming it, by feeding it new data until the new temperature becomes the baseline. Until the bigger number in your account starts to feel like home rather than a mistake. Until the correct financial decisions stop feeling like performances and start feeling like instinct. Until the question stops being, "Do I deserve to be here?" and starts being, "What do I build next?" The money is not the test. You are not the problem. The thermostat is the problem. And you now know exactly how it works. That's not a small thing. That is, in fact, everything. Because a machine you can see clearly is a machine you can change. And a machine you can change is a machine that works for you instead of against you. The thermostat is yours. The set point is yours. The temperature of the room, the financial reality you live inside every single day, that is yours to decide. Not someday, not when you feel ready, not when the imposter feeling lifts. Now, with the doubt still present, with the fear still running, with the old programming still firing in the background, you move anyway. You decide anyway. You reset the thermostat anyway. Because that is exactly what the person on the other side of the ceiling does. They move while the alarm is still ringing. They keep moving until the alarm stops being triggered. And eventually, neuroscience promises this, experience confirms it, the new temperature becomes the one that feels like home. And the old set point becomes the one that feels foreign. And you'll look back and wonder why you ever thought it was the right temperature at all. That's the moment the thermostat has been reset. That's the moment the system is finally working for you. And it starts not with more money. It starts with this: understanding exactly what has been happening inside your head every time the money showed up, all along.